Early light awakens the port city of Boston on an autumn morning. In September of 1920, one similar dawn revealed the ship City of Sparta, docked here after a long ocean voyage from India. And disembarking onto Pier 3 in Chelsea Harbor was a young Indian Swami reflecting on America's most historic city. And perhaps he alone understood the meaning of this day. This arrival marked the beginning of a new phase in the life of Paramahansa Yogananda. But for those who would come to follow his teachings, it was the beginning of a new way of life. America's Pilgrim Fathers had first landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620. And now, 300 years to the day from their arrival, this Hindu man of God planted a different kind of flag on American soil. The day was September 19th, 1920. Swami Yogananda came to America representing the timeless spiritual heritage of his ancient homeland. He had been invited here from India to lecture before a group of Unitarian clergymen. He traveled via the novel Boston subway under a strange metropolis. Unfamiliar with Western customs, and away from the simple living in his guru's ashrams, the cautious visitor was entertained by many new sights. He was escorted to the YMCA to spend the first night. He walked down these narrow halls in search of his room, at last finding his simply furnished lodgings. Standing on the same spot, one feels a reverence for the humble dwelling that sheltered the great Guru. And we share, too, his first vista of the new old world of America. As the sun began to sink in the west, Paramahansaji felt a certain sadness as he thought of his Guru and family so far away. But in his mind were also, as he was later to write in one of his poems, sleeping memories of friends once more to be. In those days, conservative Bostonians, ironically nicknamed Boston Brahmins, were influential in every aspect of life, from politics to the pulpit. In an ecumenical movement, however, the American Unitarian Association had invited Paramahansaji as a representative from India to their week-long seminar on the meaning of the 300th anniversary of the founding of America. Here at Unity House, near the Boston Common, this Congress of Religions convened. Speakers from various religious groups commented on their interpretations of freedom. But Paramahansaji's talk, The Science of Religion, focused on a deeper freedom. Practical-minded New Englanders listened with rapt attention as the Guru dwelt on the universality of all true religions. He said, although customs and modes of worship may vary, the real meaning of religion is based upon the same truths. And he stated that God could be known, actually contacted, through step-by-step scientific methods. Here was exactly what the New England Transcendentalists had sought in their solitude, a freedom beyond social and political liberty. The fascinating information given by Paramahansaji was published for wider distribution. But even with the initial enthusiasm, teaching yoga in 1920 was not an easy task. Primarily intellectually oriented, many Bostonians were interested in the metaphysical aspects of yoga, but the inner, personal idea of loving God seemed somehow remote. Yet one by one, spiritual seekers found their way to subsequent lectures by the ochre-robed Swami, and slowly interest in his teachings grew. One of the very first people interested was Mrs. Alice B. Hazy. Paramahansaji first met her when he addressed the congregation of the West Somerville Unitarian Church. Afterward, she invited the Guru to her home at 9 Leicester Terrace to meet some friends. When Paramahansaji first saw her in church, God told him, "She is the one who will start the center." And soon, a small group began to meet at Mrs. Hazy's every Friday night. This historic photo shows members of the first Yogoda meditation group. Mrs. Hazy is standing to the right of Paramahansaji. He later gave her the spiritual name of Sister Yogmata. Standing together is another family attracted to the Guru, Dr. and Mrs. Minot Lewis. The Lewises helped the Master to get acquainted with the ways of America, and Yogananda often spent weekends with them at their Electric Street home. As time passed, more students came for instruction. His first public address was at Jordan Hall on Gainsborough Street. Hushed audiences were enraptured, whether he was speaking on devotional subjects or on the most practical topics, or quoting from his newly published book, Songs of the Soul. When I smile, thou dost smile through me. When I cry, in me thou dost weep. When I wake, thou greetest me. When I walk, thou art with me. Thou dost smile and weep. Thou dost wake and walk. Like me, my likeness thou. But when I dream, thou art awake. When I stumble, thou art sure. When I die, thou art my life. In Emmanuel Church, the Guru stressed again the scientific basis of religion. At Steinert Hall, he faced more large groups. At the famous Park Street Church, where 100 years before pulpits had flamed with abolitionist messages, Paramahansaji spoke on the subject of world peace. Many civic and social clubs requested talks, and a number of Boston's university students heard not only about success in business, but most important, success in life. These were busy years, lecturing and writing, as Paramahansaji met many new people and sowed seeds of divine love everywhere. However, one day someone who had heard him speak wrote an unsigned letter criticizing his interpretation of a Bible passage about the life of Christ. Sometime later, Paramahansaji visited the Boston Public Library. Entering the venerable stone block building, he felt suddenly distracted, as if God were trying to tell him something. Inside, he paused and heard a voice say, "The man who wrote you the letter is here." Then God pointed out the man. Paramahansaji approached him and mentioned the letter. The startled man said, "How do you know who I am?" Paramahansaji lovingly smiled at him and replied, "By the same power that I know about Jesus Christ." The city of Boston showed her rustic New England charm as Swami Yogananda came to know his first home in America. Sharing for the first time in her holidays, he came to appreciate America's traditions, as well as her industry, organization, and positive spirit. He often bought fruit and vegetables here in the Haymarket Square district and walked along the sidewalks of the famous Beacon Street, which Oliver Wendell Holmes called the sunny street that holds the sifted few. It was here that he continued to work tirelessly to spread the message of yoga. In the midst of his busy schedule, Paramahansaji longed for solitude and looked forward to going with small groups to Hardy's Pond in North Waltham, a suburb of Boston. There they could meditate in the peaceful surroundings, away from the city's humming vibrations. City records show that in June of 1922, North Waltham issued a building permit to Swami Yogananda, as the Guru and his local supporters began construction of a small house on the shore. Little more than a cottage then, Paramahansaji yet called it his first ashram in America. It is a humble landmark to his selfless spirit of service. Seated in front of the retreat, we see the Guru. Notice the tent on the roof, which shows the simplicity of these early beginnings. North of Boston, across the Charles River, is Cambridge. A quaint village atmosphere pervaded the city when Paramahansaji dwelt here for a few months. Meeting students from the town's many universities, he saw firsthand America's youth. An educator himself, having founded a boys' school in India, Yogananda was very interested in education. On several occasions, he was invited to speak at the famous Harvard University, the oldest institution of higher learning in America. Named after John Harvard, the school has carried with its proud tradition a continuing spirit of seeking truth. Through its halls have walked many of this country's leading statesmen and scientists. But Yogananda saw what America's schools were missing: the spiritual training needed for a balanced life. In halls where Einsteins and Emersons had lectured, he expounded on the fundamental necessity of knowing God and the importance of the threefold development of body, mind, and spirit. A newspaper account of one of his Harvard lectures reported, "It was received with sustained cheering and deafening applause." Sometimes the Lewises would invite the Guru to visit their seaside house in South Duxbury on the Massachusetts coast. In this peaceful town near Plymouth, not far from the site of the Pilgrim's first landing, Paramahansaji often strolled along the beach at low tide, or wandered down this quiet country lane, talking with Dr. Lewis about the future of the Yogoda teachings. One July weekend, the Lewises came to South Duxbury, but Yogananda remained in Boston. Dr. Lewis and his brother and father were out sailing in their small boat, when suddenly the sea and air became perfectly still. Then a thundering electrical storm broke out, and their little skiff with its 3 helpless passengers was tossed about violently in the foamy seas. At home, Mrs. Lewis worried as she saw their boat being blown further and further out to sea. It was then that Dr. Lewis thought of Paramahansaji, and he saw a bright light and felt a great peace. Later, they were finally able to reach shore, and the 3 thanked God for their safe return. When the Lewises returned to Boston, they no sooner stepped through the door when the phone rang, and they heard the cheerful voice of Paramahansaji. "Aha, doctor, you came near getting wet today, didn't you?" From time to time, the Guru went on short trips through the beautiful New England countryside. Massachusetts takes its name from the Massachusetts tribe of Indians who once inhabited this area. A scenic state, blessed with magnificent changing seasons, it is yet most famous for its colorful history. In Concord, Paramahansaji visited the home of one of America's great authors, Ralph Waldo Emerson. He also saw the many famous historical sites associated with American independence. On the green at Lexington, Paramahansaji saw the site of the first battle of the Revolution. Later, in Virginia, he took flowers to honor the grave of George Washington. The Guru is here pictured at Plymouth Rock, which he visited upon invitation of some of the ministers who had attended the Congress of Religions. Though much has changed since the Pilgrims' arrival, the inspiration and beauty of the country remains the same. The splendor of autumn in New England is unrivaled. driving along Route 9 in the fall of 1923, giving lectures in Worcester and other cities, Paramahansaji saw the roots of America. Motoring along this same Mohawk Trail in western Massachusetts, the Guru penned the lines, "Welcomed by a fresh and smiling day, ushered by trees benign that overlay, shading our bodies from the jealous sun, with wheels of rubber pressing asphalt road, and softly humming motor noise, we rode the Mohawk Trail." Its inhabitants say Vermont is a state of mind. To be there in mid-October, when the sugar maples are ablaze with color, is to witness one of nature's most glorious spectacles. Like the pages of a picture calendar, Vermont presents a nostalgic portrait of this nation a century ago. From elegant small towns like Manchester, with its marble sidewalks, to the peaceful dairy farms nestled against the green mountains, rural America cast its spell on the enchanted visitor. As the last leaves turned from summer green to gold, Paramahansaji sensed a change coming into his life too. He had met many wonderful souls since arriving in Boston. Yet as the twilight settled over the year 1923, he felt that his path was turning in a different direction. His mission was not just to preach to a few. Babaji had sent him to the West to bring the message of self-realization to all. But how to reach the many truth-hungry souls, those who long for a deeper meaning to life? In November of 1923, with donations made by his grateful Boston students, Paramahansaji traveled to New York to give classes in America's largest city. The first series was at Town Hall, where President Wilson's daughter became interested in his teachings. Next came successes at the Waldorf Astoria and the Hotel Pennsylvania. So popular was Paramahansaji that the manager of the Hotel Pennsylvania invited him to stay as his guest for 6 months. Blasé New Yorkers flocked to huge halls as publicity about the famous yogi spread throughout local newspapers. In his New York campaign, Yogananda was greatly helped by a Boston student, Mrs. Jessie Southwick, who, along with her husband, founded Boston's Emerson College. Mrs. Southwick was a deep admirer of Paramahansaji, and she organized many public meetings and introduced the master to many prominent figures of that time. Swami Yogananda's love for both God and man magnetically drew him to people from all walks of life. Here, the Guru is seen with Massachusetts Governor Alvin Fuller. The master met George Eastman, founder of the Eastman Kodak Company, and during his stay in the nation's capital, he was invited to visit with President Calvin Coolidge at the White House. The Guru also met opera star Amelita Galli-Curci and her husband Homer Samuels, seen in front of their New York home. Both became faithful disciples and often visited Paramahansaji through the years. Later, the master would dedicate his autobiography to his friend, the renowned horticulturalist Luther Burbank, whom the Guru called an American saint. The poet Edwin Markham, called the Dean of American Poets, studied with the Guru during these early days and wrote an inscription on a photo, "Yours ever to command." Wherever he went, even in a wilderness, his Guru had told him he would attract friends. And now he felt drawn westward. In July of 1924, the Guru began a transcontinental tour of the United States. He wrote in his autobiography, "Years sped by. I lectured in every part of my new land and addressed hundreds of clubs, colleges, churches, and groups of every denomination. During the decade 1920 to 1930, my yoga classes were attended by tens of thousands of Americans. To them all, I dedicated a new book of prayers and soul thoughts, Whispers from Eternity. In Philadelphia, Washington, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Chicago, Denver, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Everywhere, Americans waited in lines to meet the radiant spiritual ambassador. December of 1924 saw Paramahansaji's arrival in Los Angeles, and it was here he established the international headquarters of Self-Realization Fellowship. This would become the first home of the Self-Realization Monastic Order, and the printing facilities and distribution center for the weekly SRF lessons, and for the monthly East-West magazine, later to become the Self-Realization magazine. In this short silent film, the Guru shared his greetings and inspiration from his new headquarters with his students and friends. He referred to Los Angeles as the Benares of America, and from this, the City of Angels, he would spread his inspired message across the country and around the world. To his 1926 edition of poems, Songs of the Soul, he penned, "Mount Washington, thy crown shall newly wear a priceless starry jewel, a school of life, which for all future here shall draw lost travelers from east and west to find their goal, their own one place of rest." But in those early days, Mount Washington was only home to Paramahansaji in between the many lecture tours that filled his life of service. His work was now on its way to becoming firmly established. The Master was a perfect example of a modern yogi. He enjoyed the simple things in life and is here pictured on an outing to a Los Angeles alligator farm. Paramahansaji returned to Boston in 1928, but unlike his first arrival, this time he was greeted at the State House by the Massachusetts governor. In 1920, his efforts to spread the message of yoga were a continuous struggle, but now he was housed in the well-known Copley Plaza Hotel as an honored guest. Boston greeted him as a native son. To the humble lover of God, personal fame and attention meant nothing. His only desire was to please God and to spread the message he was asked to bring to the West. The Guru was invited to address capacity audiences at Boston's famous Symphony Hall. The large numbers enrolling in SRF classes swelled the steadily growing tide. Often over the years, Paramahansaji must have looked back on those early days and thanked God for the faith and determined spirit he had been given. Emerson once wrote, "An institution is the lengthened shadow of one man," and it was quite a shadow that Yogananda cast. His humble beginning in Boston only heightens his greatness. There was the simple YMCA, his first shelter. Unity House, where he gave his maiden speech in America. Beacon Street, where misunderstanding children often teased the strangely dressed man. But the greatness of his soul and the mission he came to fulfill could not help but attract more and more sincere seekers. Later came Park Street Church, site of one of his first major addresses. And still later, Symphony Hall, filled to capacity when he returned to lecture once more in the city where he had first set foot in America. Many winters have since come to Boston, and many changes have been wrought in the course of American history since Paramahansaji first brought the self-realization work to this country. The great Guru loved this land because of the deep spirituality and lofty ideals that he saw coursing through its veins. But he said, "My country is omnipresence." Though he extolled the virtues of loyalty and patriotism, he often said that we should not limit ourselves by an exclusive attachment to one country. For he saw that by combining their finest features, the peoples of every land would come to realize the simple but profound truth that we are all made in God's image. The very essence of Paramahansa Yogananda's message is that we might know that the image of God is within ourselves and others. As he once said, if you contact God within yourself, you will know that he is in everyone and that he has become the children of all races. Then you cannot be an enemy to anyone. If the whole world could love with that universal love, there would be no need for men to arm themselves against one another. By our own Christ-like example, we must bring unity among all religions, all nations, all races.